everyone. Today we're having a fireside chat with Senator Dan Laughlin. I'm Ashlyn Kelly, for those who don't know me, and I'm Young Erie Professionals Civic and Community Engagement Chair. So Senator Laughlin, let's start off by you telling us a little about yourself and what you do.
Sure, Ashlyn. I guess, I'll start at the I'll start at the beginning because a lot of people don't know me that well. I'll try and be brief. I'll give you kind of the overview. Lifelong Erie resident. When I was first born, my parents lived up in the Erie Heights housing project sort of thing. It's up on Garden Avenue. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's near 38th and 79. And we lived there till I was about 10 years old. My father was a union carpenter. My mother was a homemaker. Like her claim to fame, if you will, was during World War II, when she was a young woman. She actually worked at one of the Curtiss Wright plants in Buffalo, New York, making fighter planes. So she was actually one of the what they refer to as Rosie the Riveters. And then we moved, when I was about 10 years old, we moved down to Allegheny Road, which is not too far from Grover Cleveland School, if you're familiar with that area, which is where I went to grade school, walked to school back in those days. Then I went to Roosevelt School, the one that they just tore down, by the way. It's a little sad to see that go. And then when I went to high school, my first year of high school was at Tech Memorial. I was taking an electrical class over there. But in ninth grade, my parents decided to move out to the country. They moved out to Waterford, Pennsylvania. And so then I enrolled in Fort LaBeouf High School. It was also happened to coincide, and this is probably before most of you were born, obviously. It was the winter of '76, but maybe you've heard of that winter. It was a pretty bad winter. We got, I want to say, 240 inches of snow that year. So that was kind of a defining moment, if you will, for me as far as moving out to the country. And I just thought, well, it snows an awful lot out here in Waterford, but it was quite the winter that year. When I got out of Fort LaBeouf, I went to Penn State Barron for a semester, but my family didn't have very many resources, so I had to drop out of college and go to work to support myself. And then I took classes. I took machining classes. That's what's known as the Skill Center, or at least it used to be the Skill Center out by the Erie County Tech School. It was for adult kind of community college type classes. I got a job when I graduated from that at a place called National Forge. I think it's called Erie Forge and Steel now, right on Green Garden Boulevard down near 16th and Green Garden. And I worked there a couple of years, probably maybe 3 years. And the whole time that I worked there second shift, I also worked first shift with my brothers doing construction. And then I got laid off from National Forge, and I went into construction full time, and I became a business partner with my brother Jerry. We started a company known as Laughlin Builders. Some of you may have heard of my construction company. We built kind of high-end homes in the Erie area. We won 96 awards of excellence through the Builders Association. So that's, they're not that easy to win. So we were pretty good at our jobs, I guess. I'm doing a little bragging there, maybe. But and then, so we did that. I got married, 3 kids, raised family. I'm fast forwarding through about 30 years here. And then one day, we had a state senator that I knew. He was a friend of mine. I voted for him. I voted for Senator Wiley. But we were in the midst of an economic shutdown on the state level. Erie School District was tanking. They were talking about actually closing their high schools, which by law they're allowed to. I don't know if you're aware of this. In Pennsylvania, a school district only has to teach the children through 8th grade by law. I think we might want to address that actually, but So they were talking about closing the high schools and sending the kids out, to the surrounding communities because they were so broke. And that was kind of the last straw for me, if you will. And I decided I was going to run for office. And I think I picked the Senate because I knew Senator Wiley, and I thought, I can do a better job than he's doing. So I ran obviously successfully, and I think that, for my first term, I think that I was fairly successful. I got 5 bills passed in that amount of time. I got a record amount of funding for the Erie School District. I haven't confirmed this, but I've been told that it was the largest increase in basic education funding for any school district in Pennsylvania's history. So I'm pretty proud of that. And then and then the rest of it, I think everybody knows that I've been in public life ever since. So most of what I do is either on Facebook or Twitter or in the newspaper, right? So that's kind of the short story on who Dan Laughlin is.
So what is a typical workday like for a Pennsylvania state senator?
Well, it varies greatly, Ashlyn. And, some days, I'm traveling through the district. We have a lot of meetings that we do. Maybe a fairly typical day when I'm in district, we'll have a lot of people. This is let's pretend COVID is over with. Okay. Usually the meetings are in the district office here. People will come in, they'll sit down, and we'll chat about whatever their issues are, and try and help them through either issues with state government, suggestions for proposed legislation, and we run a fairly busy office with meetings and phone calls and things like that. There's days where we'll have 10 meetings scheduled. They won't even every half hour, and it's a pretty hectic schedule sometimes. And I have good staff. We take a lot of phone calls. In this past year, with unemployment issues, I mean, it's been almost nonstop dealing with people not being able to get their unemployment. With the pandemic, unemployment was a new system that was kind of thrown into the mix as well. So we've had to deal with a lot of phone calls over that and tried to help people and expedite their claims and things like that. But down in Harrisburg, it's completely different schedule. That is tied mostly with our session schedule, and we have a lot of meetings down in Harrisburg. 4, 5, 6, 7 meetings a day down there as well. But those are mostly legislation tied. We meet with a lot of lobbyists down there, and I know the word lobbyist has kind of a bad connotation, but it's not like the average person thinks. The lobbyists are more just an interaction or intermediary between usually companies or groups of individuals, and they'll hire a lobbyist just to basically interact with us guys. They just have more access and kind of know the system a little bit. It's not. I can't speak for the federal level. I'm only for the state level. And these folks act as an intermediary, and they come in and they'll tell you what their group or firm or whatever has an issue with and what their point of view is. And so we sit through a lot of that. We have a lot of hearings on different topics, bills that are potentially running. We'll have public hearings, and it's a pretty hectic pace. And there's a lot to read. There's a lot to keep track of. And then in addition to all that, there's a lot of lobbying that we as legislators have to do too. And what I mean by that, if there's a bill that, let's say, I strongly support, I will be making calls on that bill to both House members and Senate members to try and gather support for the bill, talk them through it. A lot of them will have questions about it. So that's kind of a typical day down in Harrisburg. I'll spend probably, I'd say on average, maybe 2 to 3 hours on the phone down there. I'll sit through probably at least half a dozen meetings. Then we'll have session. When we're in session, the actual, when you're actually in session, that's not, trying to describe this accurately for you. When you're in session, you're on the floor, typically on the Senate floor, and you'll be voting on bills and whatnot. And then sometimes we'll leave the floor and have caucus, and that's where you'll go down. And we have a special caucus room where we'll discuss the upcoming bills that we're going to vote on. A lot of times the bills aren't very controversial, so it doesn't require very much discussion, but some of them are very controversial. And we'll try and kind of map out a little bit of a game plan, like, if this bill is going to even have a chance of passing or not, and things like that. And then, I would say the kind of the stereotypical session day down in Harrisburg is a fairly long day. I typically get up at 6 a.m. I'll read some of my emails and things like that. Get into my office by 8. Do some more of what we already had talked about. And then, quite frankly, even after that, then there's usually a dinner meeting where you meet with maybe another lobbying firm about some other bill that they want to bend your ear about. And it gets to be a long day. So my typical day in Harrisburg is typically about 6 a.m. till probably 7 or 8 at night. And when I get home from Harrisburg, I'm pretty tired, and not to mention the drive home after that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of gives you just a rough idea of what our normal day is.
So since you mentioned bills, what is one bill or policy that needs legislation for the benefit of Erie County citizens but lacks public awareness and support?
Well, there's plenty to choose from in that category, Ashlyn. I can tell you that. Some of the things, I'm going to talk broadly here first, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that I see where Erie County has really taken it on the chin in the last, say 20 or 30 years. Some of the things that are federal level issues, and I know I can't talk forever here, but I'll tell you what I see. Erie County, when NAFTA passed back in the early 90s, that was a fairly defining moment for Erie, Pennsylvania. We lost a lot of manufacturing jobs after that. And I know that we're supposed to talk about state level issues here, but what the federal folks do really affects my job as well. So that kind of set us on a path of decline, if you will, and we've been fighting that ever since. Now on the state level, though, some of the bills that I think that we need to get done. The Family Care Act, I know we might be jumping ahead here. I know you had that on your list of things to ask me about. But the pandemic really highlighted the need for that. There's so many people in Erie County that are living, maybe paycheck to paycheck, or maybe not much better than that. And the Family Care Act would have really helped soften some of the economic hardships that a lot of families were thrust into with this pandemic. Even the ones that were eligible for unemployment, if they lost their job because of the pandemic, the fact that our unemployment system is so antiquated, for a lot of them to wait 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks to get a check, the Family Care Act would have stepped in sooner than that, at least hopefully, and run a little smoother. So the Family Care Act would have been one that I think would have really been helpful this last 12 months. So that's probably, if you're asking me what the number one thing that would have been helpful was, that would probably be it.
And since you mentioned it, can you tell us a little bit about the Family Cares Act and why it needs to get passed?
Sure. There is a ton of people that are barely making ends meet, that are kind of the working poor, if you will. The Family Care Act would take a very small payroll deduction, and it's also scaled a little bit. And I don't have the bill in front of me, so I should have probably read through it again before my interview tonight. But it would take basically a 5-cent deduction out of every $10 that a person earns. And that goes into a fund that would be very similar to the unemployment fund. And then if you have to take off, let's say you're having a child, you would be, because currently you have 12 weeks of unpaid leave that you can take under the Federal Family Care Act. And this would be basically where you could have paid family leave for a situation like that. Or if you have an aging, ailing parent, this happens to all of us. We all go through this life cycle, right? I took care of my parents to the best of my ability when they got old. And, let's say, for example, let's say your mother's 80 years old and she trips and breaks her hip, right? And, she needs a little bit of recovery time. You got to help out. If you need 5 or 6 weeks off from work, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, you can't afford to go help your mother. So what winds up happening is a lot of people in a situation like that, they will quit their job to go take care of their mother, which, arguably that's the right thing to do. Your mother needs help. And then what winds up happening is a lot of folks in that situation never re-enter the workforce, because then the system is so broken, they can't come back then. And the Family Care Act is a bill that would allow for that short-term being away from work, provide an income while you're there, and allow you to come back to work. It's actually a very fiscally responsible bill if you look at the overall statistics, because people statistically, if they enter the, I hate to say just call it welfare, but that's kind of the generalized term. Once they're in that system, a lot of them never come back. And we want people to be in the workforce. We want them to raise their family and have a job and kind of live the American dream. But if they get trapped in poverty, that doesn't do them any good, and it also doesn't do society any good. So this bill is a good family bill. It's very fiscally responsible because it helps keep people stay on their feet, and that's a good thing all the way around.
One of your other plans for this term is a city revitalization improvement zone for Erie. So what would this mean?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, Ashley. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. This is something, and I want to put this in context for people, okay? This means so much to me that the day I got sworn in 2017, I literally walked off the Senate floor from being sworn in, went down to my Senate office, signed the paper because I couldn't sign it officially until I was sworn in, and sent a letter to the governor asking him to please give the city of Erie a revitalization improvement zone. And, I've been battling it out with him ever since. We don't have one yet. But when I look at our city, the city I grew up in, and I see the difference in these other cities that have a CRIZ. And I'll give you an example. The city of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, last year they had $8.7 million that went into their CRIZ fund. And that money is created by state taxes that they don't have to send to Harrisburg, because that was money that grew from their tax baseline and from their baseline year. And I don't know how in depth I should go here as far as that, but there's a baseline when you get your baseline year, if you're approved for a CRIZ, and then anything that you can grow Above that, you get to keep the state tax dollars locally and use them for economic development. And to give the folks that are watching this that know an awful lot about Erie, because you're from here, right? We have one Fortune 500 company in Erie, Pennsylvania. It's Erie Insurance. Lancaster, Pennsylvania is a city of only about 55,000. They had no Fortune 500 companies there. And in the last 5 years, they've been able to attract 3 separate Fortune 500 companies to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And they've been able to do that with some of the investments that the CRIS has provided for them. The downtown in Lancaster is booming now. They have so much money for economic development. They are able to lure companies in there with it. And in my opinion, we desperately need some economic development funding stream, if you will. And when I talk to the Chamber of Commerce locally, when you talk to them, one of the main things that they don't have to try and attract a company here is they just don't have the resources to try and bring anybody into Erie. We have companies that, they put out an RFP and they're looking for a place to locate. Well, when you raise your hand and say, hey, look at Erie, right? And the company says, well, can you provide me with, 1 million gallons of water a day and, 10 megawatts of electricity? And we have to say, well, it would cost you, $5 million to get those to your site. And they say, well, I don't know, someplace in Mississippi already has it. Why would I spend that money? So those are, I know we're getting kind of into the weeds here a little bit, but those are some of the issues that we need to address here when we're talking about attracting companies here. For those of you that have been here for a long time, we've always had GE, right? Well, it's called Wabtec now. They've renamed it during that buyout, but we've always had General Electric as one of our major employers. Well, if there's a company that's similar to that that's looking to locate, you have to ask yourself, why would they come here, right? If we can't offer them anything, and that's one of the reasons that I feel so strongly about having a CRIS, is it would provide the much needed economic development dollars where we could either provide infrastructure for companies that are looking to come here, or maybe even just a tax incentive. And that's, that's the overview, I guess.
Thank you. And since you love Erie so much, what is your favorite thing about Erie?
Well, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Presque Isle State Park. That's, I think that's pretty high up on most people's lists. But quite frankly, there's a lot to love about Erie. The kind of the small town feel, yet with many of the amenities that bigger towns have. We have a nice, thriving arts and culture community here. My wife and I love to go to the Erie Playhouse and see a live show, and it's easy to get in and out of. It's not like trying to drive to Pittsburgh and you're trapped in traffic. So we have a lot of the features that people like about a bigger town, but it's very convenient. Anywhere you can go in Erie is about 15 or 20 minutes. We have a hockey team, a basketball team, a baseball team. I love taking my kids down to see the Seawolves when the kids were younger. My oldest son actually lost his one front tooth at a Seawolves game, and we had to have people in the seats next to us help us find his tooth that fell right out. So it's a little, fun story for me that I tell people about being down there. And not only that, if you do need to go somewhere else, we have Cleveland, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, all within about a 2-hour drive. If there is something that, one of the bigger cities needs to, that you do want to go see, I'm going to go down and see a Penguins game here at the end of the month. And, it's just a couple hour drive to get down there. So we're centrally located with that. And I think there's a lot to love about Erie, but those are a couple of my favorite things.
I think that's a lot of our favorites, especially Presque Isle in the summer. coming up here soon. We also had some fireside chats with Representative Bob Mirsky and Representative Brian Bizzaro, and they both also emphasized and talked about Erie's smallness and how they took advantage of that for their networking. How did you maintain your networks as you advanced in your career?
Well, that's another great question, Ashlyn. And I will tell you that like anything, it takes maintenance. And what I do a lot of times when I'm driving down to Harrisburg is I will just kind of scroll through the Rolodex on my phone, not looking at it physically now, just so you know. But I'll scroll through my Rolodex, and if there's somebody on there that I haven't talked to in a little while, I'll just give them a holler. And it's a great way to pass the time while I'm driving. It's a great way to stay in touch with people. I know a lot of people, stay in touch on Twitter and Facebook and whatnot. But I found that actually having a conversation with people is a great way to kind of reconnect and stay at the forefront of their mind as well. And Erie's a big small town is the way I see it, and you can make a lot of connections and reconnect with a lot of people in kind of a short period of time if you do take the time to reach out and just chat with people.
Okay, and then as someone who has experience being a small business owner and with COVID-19 on everyone's mind, what in your mind is a solution to assist the recovery of small businesses, specifically restaurants, that can be done through policy or by small business owners?
Well, that's a little bit of a touchy subject, depending on who you want to talk to about that. I will say this: I am very thankful that the vaccine rollout is really starting to ramp up, and our COVID numbers are starting to really plummet. I believe that our restaurants are going to be fully open within, I would say probably within weeks, maybe a month at the most. And quite frankly, from the restaurant owners and hospitality industry folks that I've talked to, simply being allowed to be open is really what they're pushing for. I'm not saying that, maybe a grant program or something to kind of help clean up some of their debt wouldn't be helpful to them. I'm not, obviously that would be helpful. But right now, the number one thing that I hear out of that industry is they merely just want to open up. And I think it's going to become a lot safer as more and more people have the vaccine. There's less, quite frankly, there's less people that are able to host the virus then. So it should start to drop off pretty significantly now. And I'm very hopeful that we don't lose any more in that business community, because we have lost quite a few businesses in that space.
Mm-hmm. And then we only have a couple more questions for you. So next one is, what actions would you like to see young professionals take to positively change our community?
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that. And obviously politics means a lot to me now. It's kind of my new field of work, if you will. And there is a great talent pool within groups like the Young Erie Professionals. And I know you're all busy too. But honestly, I think one of the greatest things that I could hope for is that folks like you would get involved in the political process a little bit younger than I did. I'm not saying I'm terribly over the hill here or anything. I do kind of wish that I might have jumped in at least a few years sooner. I've always had a pretty big opinion on how things should be run. And I know that there's people within your group that probably feel the same way. I know the deadline is approaching to get your signatures in. It's March 9th. So if one of you on the Zoom tonight says, I should just dash out and get my signatures and run for city council or something, I think it would be a great thing for this region. Some of the folks on city council, and I'm not going to name any names or point any fingers, but some of them that have been there a very long time. And I think it might be time for some fresh perspective on a group like that, and probably county council as well. There's always school board seats where, if you want to just dip your toes in the political world, school board's a great place to start. You get a feel for what it's like to, have a say in a community like that. And quite frankly, we need young people to get involved. We need the perspective, we need the energy, and I'd be happy to help any of you run for office if you are so inclined. Doesn't matter what party you are, I'd be happy to help you.
And then how can we support new politicians or younger politicians in their journeys towards public office? Since there are many that are running this year, what can we do to support them?
Well, there's a couple things. It's good to pay attention. I believe that most of the people in your group do, but there's, you all have friends that probably don't. Try and engage them and get them interested in it. So many people watch sports and stuff, and they can tell you the statistics of, I don't know, who dropped what pass on Monday morning. And yet the world can be burning down around them, and they don't even notice it. So I think if you look at, if people would start to look at politics with the same amount of enthusiasm that they do for some of these sporting events, I think the world would be in a lot better shape. And it's a matter of staying engaged and informed. And I will say this to you. There's a lot of people on social media that whichever side of the aisle that they seem to favor or fall on, they think the other side is 100% wrong. And I can tell you in real world, just my real world experience, that is not true. It doesn't matter which side of the aisle that you favor or are on. The other side is not 100% wrong, and your side is not 100% right. And that's the point that I think if I could drive home for your people that are watching this video, you really need to look at what gets said on both the news and on social media. Use your inner guidance, if you will, and say, boy, if it sounds wrong, it probably is. And, neither side holds a patent on being right. I can tell you that for sure. The truth is usually somewhere in the middle. There's a few of us legislators that really do try to be bipartisan. I consider myself to be one of them. And I try to listen to everybody with an open mind. And I see a little bit of that being lost when I see some of the arguments on social media. So if you could just, encourage all your members to be a little bit more thoughtful in their own thought processes. Like, well, how can somebody be 100% wrong and then say, well, they probably aren't, so I'm going to listen a little bit closer.
Okay. So do you have any questions for us? I also have Ben and Amy here on the call with me.
When we get back to a little bit more normal setting, we're a little bit post-pandemic. I went to one of your events. I think it was just last. No, it wouldn't have been this past summer. 2 summers ago, down at the yacht club. I have to tell you, I really enjoyed that. I didn't get a chance to stay a long time, but I think those public interactions, where you can just stand around, maybe have a beer or whatever, and just chat with people, get to know them a little bit, I think are very important. And this kind of ties back into, the question that we just talked about as far as social media and different points of view. I think it's very important to just talk to people and listen to them without trying to judge what they're saying. And quite often you'll learn a little something, or you'll pick up a new point of view if you're open to it. But you have to be purposely kind of open to at least listening to someone else's point of view. And I think if that's the one takeaway that people can take from this discussion tonight, is just to listen a little bit more with more of an open mind.
And then Amy and Ben, did you guys have any additional questions at all?
I actually do, but Amy, I wasn't sure if you had one. I was gonna let you go ahead first.
So I was gonna let you go.
Okay. So Senator Laughlin, you mentioned this a little bit earlier in the discussion about attracting businesses to cities. Where did you gain your knowledge of sort of? Sorry, I'm trying to think of how to word this. Where did you get your knowledge base of how to attract businesses to cities? And where would you advise a young professional to look if they wanted to learn that information?
Well, I haven't had any formal training on that, Ben. I just, I know what it's like to be out in the business world. Now, granted, I was a small business owner, but when you look at what a business needs to be successful, that doesn't change that much until maybe you get into the truly large businesses. They have some different issues, but most of the small to mid-sized businesses need the same thing. They need a skilled workforce. They need the raw materials that they might need if they're a manufacturer, and they just need a tax environment that they can work in without, if you're in such a high tax environment that you're not going to make any money, why would you venture into that, right? I will tell you this: one of the things that being senator has allowed me to do, I've been allowed to meet some people that maybe I wouldn't have normally been in the same circle with those folks, right? I don't know if any of you remember this, but a couple of years ago, actually about 3 years ago now, I watched a 60-minute segment, and I would suggest for your folks that are watching this to Google this. It's only about a 10-minute, 60-minute video, but it's a guy by the name of Joe Max Higgins. Have you heard of him? He's an economic development guy from they call it the Golden Triangle down in Mississippi. And this guy is an absolute fireball. And he has brought 6,000 jobs, at least at the time of that, when this thing was made a few years ago for 60 Minutes. He brought 6,000 new jobs into a community that was basically the size of Waterford, Pennsylvania. So you can imagine what an impact that's had on that area. And I watched this segment and I said to my staff, I said, oh my God, this guy's my hero. So I picked up the phone and I called down there, and that's how I actually introduced myself. I said, this is Senator Laughlin from Erie, Pennsylvania, and I'd like to speak to Joe Max Higgins. He's my hero. And the lady on the phone laughed right out loud. She goes, I'll go get him. I got to tell him that, right? So we chatted on the phone. I wound up taking a team of people from Erie, from the Erie Chamber, and from our redevelopment authority. We flew down to Mississippi, met with the guy, and had a nice chat. He showed us around at some of the things that he has been able to do. And then for the 2019 Erie Homecoming that the Chamber puts together, he was actually he was one of the keynote speakers for up here. And so it's only like a 10-minute video. If you Google his name in 60 Minutes and watch that, you'll see why I was so excited to meet this guy. So just things like that, it's a little bit of learn as I go. And I can tell everybody that's watching this video, though, that every day that I get up and come to work here, I do my best to try and represent this district. I know occasionally I do things that, some of you might not agree with or whatever. But I will tell you that every day I do what I believe, at least, to be the best that I can for this district.
Thank you. That video popped right up actually as I Googled it. So
all right, you're going to enjoy watching it.
would you say to people who don't necessarily feel qualified or that they have the proper background or the proper resources to either get more involved politically or even in lobbying or locally, like city council, things like that?
Well, first off, Amy, I will tell you that, you know, I had my own doubts when I ran for this seat. And, you know, when I decided to throw my hat in the ring and start campaigning, you know, it was all about the campaign. And I ran and I ran. And then the day after the election, I woke up, and it takes a second for it to soak in, right? Like when I first woke up, you know, it didn't even click. You know, I wasn't thinking about anything. And then about 30 seconds into having my eyes open, I said, "Oh my God, I won. I'm the senator." And I was like, "Now what?" Right? And I had a serious moment of doubt that morning. I thought, "Oh my God, what have I done? I don't know how to be senator." So there's, you know, that's natural. That's just human nature. You know, I went for it and I won, but I'd never been senator before. So this was going to be uncharted territory. And then what I quickly realized after, you know, a few weeks in, and, you know, it was very hectic for a while. You know, I had to staff my office and had to staff the office down in Harrisburg, and everybody wants to meet with you. So it's really furious period of time. So I was kind of moving through this process. And then as I progressed along, you know, once that initial rush got done and behind you and started getting the hang of things, what I realized very quickly was that the 30 years of business experience that I had of dealing with difficult customers and solving problems, just the life skills that I had amassed were everything that I needed to be a successful senator. And I will tell you, if we're being honest with each other, a lot of the skills that I see down in Harrisburg don't have anything at all, like nothing at all to do with the actual nuts and bolts of being a senator, just the, you know, the stuff that's written down on paper, you know, how to pass a bill and this, that, and the other thing. That has nothing to do with being a successful either state representative or senator. Where it comes in is just your people skills. Because if you can go down there and make friends with people and convince them that what you need is almost, if you convince them that it's their idea in the first place, you're going to get stuff done, right? And I picked up those skills by being in business. So, you know, you're a CPA, Amy. You deal with people all the time. You know, good with the numbers, I'm assuming. You know, listen, that's what I tell people when I'm down in Harrisburg when I'm in these appropriations hearings, right? I tell them, listen, I come from the world where 2 + 2 still equals 4, because they'll come in, these folks that come into an appropriations hearing, and they're trying to make their sales pitch to you why they need to be funded, okay? And they'll tell you something like, well, you know, for every dollar you put into this program, Dan, you're going to get $3 back in taxes. And I'll look at them, well, we should just give you $10 billion and we'll be running in the black and everything's good. And just kind of laugh. That's political math. That's what I call political math. Because, you know, it's not true. You're not going to solve the state budget by giving them $10 billion. So it's a little bit of a stretch. So having the real world experience, in my opinion, is more important in a setting like that than having a Harvard degree in whatever, in finance. Okay, you might know the ins and outs of how to run Amazon, but you're not going to be any better at being a senator with that degree. You need the real world experience. And I think that anybody within your group probably is already working on the skills that they need to be a successful either council person, state rep, senator, whatever.
So that's all that we had for you. Senator Laughlin. So we thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to meet with us and do this little fireside chat with you. We do look forward to having an in-person event with you at some point once everything with COVID clears.
Yeah, that sounds very nice, Ashley. I look forward to that as well. And had I known, I would have put the little fireplace on my phone so it would have seemed more authentic here.
Well, we just came up with the name like within this past week. So, because before there were like just Q&A sessions, and we're like, we need something more clever than Q&A. So,
All right, I can appreciate that. If I'd have thought about it, I would have had a fireplace as my background picture.
maybe we can do another one in the future, and then you can do it.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, listen, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you all for having me. Been gracious hosts.